Bitcoin is a language that all 8 billion people can speak. Bitcoin is a way that you are able to win the language game of your values and your action. And it's one, embodying all the values of Bitcoin that everyone has the opportunity to speak in and communicate. What you consider Bitcoin as to be really impacts if you think it's succeeding or failing or how it's doing. And so a lot of people, and myself as well, I have the privilege that it can be store of value. I receive my paychecks in dollars. A lot of people don't have that ability. Most businesses around me only accept dollars, although one of the projects of the Cornell Club this year, and we've already started, is working to onboard the local businesses to accept Bitcoin, and they're very excited about it. Just if you look at the diffusion of innovation or kind of the adoption thus far of Bitcoin, we're past the tipping point. We're past that point. And so I think it's every person just sharing with their neighbor, with their friend, with their local community a little bit about Bitcoin. That's just going to continue to grow and spread.
Hello, Bitcoiner. Welcome to another episode of the ABC podcast. Today, I'm super excited to welcome Ella to the podcast. Today, Ella has a really diverse experience, and her interest in Bitcoin is interesting. Ella, your interest in Bitcoin is interesting because of the kind of profile you have and how you started and how you are really doing really well in the space trying to promote adoption. Welcome to the show, Ella. How are you doing?
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Nick. I'm well, thank you.
Awesome. Good to have you on the show today. While I was going through your profile and trying to formulate my questions for you, I kind of, paused for a bit, especially when I saw one of the last lines in your profile was Bitcoin class of 2021. And I was like, wow, you came into this space in 2021 and you're already doing so much in the space. That kind of piqued my interest in speaking to you today. So, can you tell us how did it get started for you in the Bitcoin space from the beginning?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Nick. And I will say, I think it's a bit, part of gradually, then suddenly you just start doing a little bit and then you're able to do a lot. And people talk a lot about kind of the permissionless nature of Bitcoin. You don't have to ask permission to do any project. You just start. So that's really grounded a lot of how I've been able to do what I've done thus far. But my journey started in high school. I went to a high school that had this program called the Technology, Innovation, and Entrepreneurship Certificate Program. And essentially what that meant was when you entered the school, and until your senior year inclusive, you would take classes that fit under one of those three strands. So either more technology-centered, innovation, or entrepreneurship. I chose the innovation strand to focus on. And so one of the courses that fulfilled that was just called Blockchain Technologies. And that was really my first exposure to really anything in this space. And I have to admit, it really went over my head at first. I didn't really understand distributed ledger technology. I hadn't connected the dots I have now. At the same time, was also taking the Gary Gensler blockchain and money class on YouTube. My mom and I kind of started going down this rabbit hole together, and she's the one that recommended it to me. So kind of collecting dots, hearing all of these words for the first time. And then it was after my freshman year in college, I went to NYU Shanghai, and it was all online. And so I kind of just lived by myself at home for that year and took classes at all hours of the day. At the end of that year, my mom and I went to the Oslo Freedom Forum in Norway, put on by the Human Rights Foundation. And it was on that plane ride home where I really fully fell down the rabbit hole. That was my tipping point, I'd say. And throughout the year ahead, I had been still consuming podcasts, learning. I took a class on creativity in the spring, so right before we went to Oslo, and we chose a creator to study, and I happened to choose Kathy Wood, and so I was learning a lot about thinking differently, embracing, asking questions, not in pursuit of an answer, kind of creative destruction, and so all of that piled into me, I think, finally understanding Bitcoin and saying, finally discovering the impact. And so from that point on, and we can chat more about this if you want, I was able to get involved with Generation Bitcoin. I decided to focus my studies at school on Bitcoin. I've since started a Bitcoin Club, co-founded the Bitcoin Students Network, and also now been able to work officially in Bitcoin.
Wow, awesome. So now, like the really thing that really piqued your interest was after the Oslo Freedom Forum. Was it like there was something you heard, or how did it really happen in the Oslo Freedom Forum that really, you know, sparked that interest?
Yeah, I think sitting there, hearing all of the stories of all of the activists that were on stage, um, and I really did. I grew up in Texas, in the US. I grew up in immense financial privilege. I had never even, like, it's embarrassingly thought about being debanked, or I've never experienced hyperinflation, or having my voice censored, being deplatformed. None of these, all of the lived experiences of the people that were on stage, I just had never even thought of before or been exposed to. And so you see all that, and then you realize the importance of property rights and being able to, be self sovereign and have financial freedom, and how that is so fundamental for every other right that you experience in society. And the theme that year was Champions of Change. And so I just got on the plane. It's like Bitcoin was born in Gen Z. Like, this is, if it had to be assigned a generation, it would be kind of my generation. Like, we do need to be champions of change. And that
Yeah.
really struck with me. And then I love looking at numbers and patterns. And I had started noting down a lot of different numbers in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And that was another side rabbit hole. But really, it was hearing their stories and then just feeling very like, this is the best expression of my humanity. Like, this is the work I have to do or be a part of.
Yeah, really interesting because I mean, I know for someone that comes where I come from, it's really a totally different story. Like hearing your story now and how you started in Bitcoin is, super interesting and really amazing. Different people has described Bitcoin as different things. Some say is digital gold, some say is honest money, some say is decentralized money, but you have described Bitcoin to be coded for empathy and moral soundness. So
Yeah.
what does that really mean to you?
Yeah, so I'll provide some additional context to kind of frame how I got here. And feel free to stop me if I get off track. But prior to Bitcoin, I was really interested in how one might embed ethics in AI, specifically in tech, but AI specifically. I had spent my junior year of high school in Beijing, and when I landed, I didn't know a word of Mandarin. But I had incredible teachers. I lived with a host family that they really mainly only spoke Chinese. So I had to learn it very quickly. And one day, our teacher wrote on the chalkboard a character, and it was the character for filial piety, which is one of the core tenets in Confucianism. And basically, what this character depicts is that when you're young, your parents will take care of you, but when you grow up, you'll take care of your parents. And so this character visually shows kind of it's composed of two characters. The bottom character is kind of the child's character, and the top one it means old, kind of symbolizes the elderly. And it visually is showing the supportive nature in this relationship. And so I had that in my mind, and then I got back to school, and that was my junior year for my senior year, and I started working at IBM, and I was just again surrounded by AI, and I started wondering, like, if you can code ethics into a written language, could you do the same in a computer language. So that was kind of the preface of how I reached this conclusion in Bitcoin. And then I'll try to keep it to the Spark Notes. Once I was here at Cornell, I took a class on language and how, like Nick, you and I right now, and everyone that might be listening to this later on, we're all playing a game called the language game, which is basically, can I do a good enough job getting my meaning across to you? And can you understand my meaning? And it's a game because language is imperfect. How we express is imperfect. And so with Bitcoin, though, and this is what I'm kind of arguing in my thesis this year, Bitcoin is a language that all 8 billion people can speak. Bitcoin is a way that you are able to win the language game of your values and your action. And it's one, embodying all the values of Bitcoin that everyone has the opportunity to speak in and communicate. And I wrote another article kind of about going into Bitcoin as kind of maintaining ethics in it, just in its natural incentive mechanism. But I also would add that I tend to think of Bitcoin as a tool, especially when I talk to people my age, because they might see, me focusing my studies on Bitcoin, my career in Bitcoin. It's just a lot of Bitcoin. And for them, I say, no, like Bitcoin can just be a tool that you either choose to pick up or not. It doesn't need to be your entire focus of life. Keep that interest that you have. We need scientists, other careers, but just let Bitcoin be a tool for you. So hopefully I didn't ramble too much, but that's the gist.
Yeah, that's awesome and really, really intriguing comparison because, like you said, Bitcoin allows everybody to participate. It fosters communication, and money is also one of the language that everybody understands. Even if I don't understand what you're saying, and you show me paper money or any money, I will know that you're already
Yeah.
talking about money. And Bitcoin really being able to connect all these and help people to communicate and help people to do anything they want, and also being able to participate, and also being a tool, especially because different people see Bitcoin in different ways and they use it in different ways. That's really, really interesting and
Yeah.
intriguing comparison right there. um
Yeah.
Now let's talk about your work, because you are doing a lot. First of all, we are going to talk about your work based on the academic side, and then we also talk about your work based on the ground, and also involvement with the community of your age, which is the Gen Z. Um, Now you founded the Cornell Bitcoin Club, and also you also co-founded the Generation Bitcoin, and then you also have also the Bitcoin Students Network. Can you briefly talk about this project and what you do there?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Nick. So, Generation Bitcoin was really my first kind of exposure into younger people into Bitcoin. The co-founders, Arsh Malu, Ashana Misra, and Adam Domingo, they started it back in 2021, 2022. And then I reached out to Arsh and said, hey, this is awesome what you are doing. Is there any way I can be supportive? Could I join? And so they said yes, and so that's kind of how I got involved with that. And one thing we did this year is we partnered with Bitcoin Magazine to offer free student tickets to all students that wanted to come to Bitcoin 2024. And we had about 1,500 students claim the ticket. And
Really?
then I've been able to talk with a lot of students recently, kind of under the umbrella of the Students Network, that went to Nashville and had the ability to be in person and in community with people, talking about Bitcoin. And they said, yeah, that was the moment where I realized I just have to do more in my day to day life to share Bitcoin with others, to participate more in this ecosystem. So that was huge because I think the ability to be in person, whether if it's just your local meetup or a conference, is hugely valuable. And that's kind of the impetus as well around the Bitcoin Students Network. And so I'll chat about that now. The Students Network is more than anything, how can we just help students on campuses, but you don't necessarily have to be in a college campus, have conversations about Bitcoin with their peers. And so through that, the Cornell Bitcoin Club was a bit of the guinea pig. It was kind of the how do we actually go about doing this? And so I'd say there's two main arms of that. There's the education side, and then there's the jobs and internship side. Because I think seeing a future for you in the space, how you can contribute, how you can apply your skills to the Bitcoin ecosystem is a huge incentive to want to go to a club meeting at 5:30 on a Wednesday night or whatever it might be. So really, we help students that have a spark to want to start a club do that. And so we help you, what are the steps, like literally each and every step you need to take to formalize a club or formalize gathering a group of people together. And I say that because it's still a huge win, a huge success if you just get a group together for dinner or coffee and you spend an hour and you talk about an interesting article or a podcast. That's still mission accomplished. And then next step, also trying to provide students with resources they can use during their meetings. Again, try to take some of the workload off of the person leading the club. And then eventually financial resources, and then the jobs internship pipeline really work to try to help build those out and open them up to students. And so right now we have contacts with students in about 62 countries, and then we have about 30 clubs that are either developed or soon to be kind of go live. And so it's just been a huge gift to be able to meet so many people my age that are just doing amazing things.
Awesome. Well, that's the really great work that you are doing there and you and your team are doing there. So now you're doing two things. First of all, you are onboarding the students into Bitcoin, which means you need to educate them before you onboard them. And then you also exposing them to opportunities in the Bitcoin space. What has been in this your engagement, what has been like the most interesting thing that you have learned speaking and trying to onboard these students?
Yeah, well, one, I'm always shocked when I get on a call and I talk with a student and they have, read Mastering Bitcoin 3 years ago, and they have gone through some of the chain code developer resources, or there's just all of these pockets of students all over that are just so committed and hardworking on furthering the space. So I find that very helpful. And I think, if you're just in the normal Twitter ecosystem or at a conference, maybe you don't see that as much, but it's really exciting when I get to meet these students that are doing it. So I think that's probably one of the best parts. And then as well, being able to connect students with each other. And so what's fun is that I'll have a call with, let's just say, someone at NYU, and they think that they're the only one that's interested in Bitcoin. And then I get to say, no, like I actually have someone else that I just talked to, and then put them in contact. Because for myself, before I started the Cornell Bitcoin Club, I really thought I was the only one interested in Bitcoin. I knew I couldn't possibly, because this is a huge school. But once you kind of just like post that flyer that, hey, we exist, someone's here, well, now we just surpassed 100 members. And so it's really exciting if you just create the space, all the people that come in.
Awesome. I mean, your generation really have the best access to when it comes to the internet and the communication,
Yeah.
and them also being able to learn and communicate. And I'm very very sure that what you are doing is really helping the generation. And you also mentioned, which was very important, that Bitcoin was actually invented in your generation, which means that your generation should also champion the Bitcoin adoption. And I see that the initiative that you have is really an interesting one. But do you plan to expand this your initiative, the one you have in your school? Do you plan to do it in other universities around the US or even outside the US?
Yep. So the Bitcoin Students Network, you could think of it kind of as like the top of the umbrella. And then you have like the Cornell Bitcoin Club or the Longhorn Bitcoin Club, or there's one that just started in France. they are all kind of spokes coming down out of the Bitcoin Students Network. And so there's a lot in Canada, the Laurier Bitcoin Club. So it is happening, and that's the goal. We just want to make it really easy for people in universities across the world or in their local communities, students across the world, to kind of plug and play, start this community, start this club. And then as well, so we call them nodes. Like all of the proof of work of each individual node kind of ladders up and supports the network as a whole. So, for instance, if I hold a club meeting, then and we have like a virtual option, then everyone in the students network kind of we make sure they have access to the link to join in. So it might be a physical location of one club, but the network, everyone gets to benefit from each other's work, meeting each other, supporting each other. So yes, absolutely, worldwide is the goal, and gratefully, it's already happening.
Awesome. Do you have plans to also expand it to Africa?
Yeah, so we have 8 countries in Africa right now represented. So yeah, a lot in Ghana, Kenya, and Nigeria. So I'm so excited to be there in Kenya in December and get to meet some in person.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk briefly about your research on Bitcoin, because in the Cornell Brooks School Tech Policy Institute, how do you approach the intersection of Bitcoin and tech policy? Because it has really been a lot of conversation around Bitcoin and tech policy. Should the policy that is applied in the fintech be also applied in the Bitcoin, or should the policy that is being made for crypto applied for Bitcoin? How do you see this intersection?
Yeah, I would say no. Bitcoin needs its own policy. Well, I'll also preface I am certainly not a policy. Nothing I say should be final. I mean, in the U.S., you look at Bitcoin, and I think all the different regulatory bodies. There's like 4 or 5 different considerations of what Bitcoin is. But the reason, so I'll give some context to the study. So the professor, the advisor to the Cornell Bitcoin Club, is Professor Dr. Sarah Krebs, and she founded the Cornell Brooks Tech Policy Institute. And she last year put together, along with, we received a grant from the Human Rights Foundation and the Reynolds Foundation to essentially do the first academic Bitcoin adoption study. And so, if anyone's familiar with Chainalysis's Global Crypto Adoption Index, you could sort of think similar to that, but a bit different. And so, this study will look at about 25 countries that are either fully or partly authoritarian countries, and look at the relationship between Bitcoin adoption and financial freedom. So, evaluate what the Bitcoin adoption looks like. We were able to kind of hone in on these 25 countries through like 15 different criteria, scoring them, and that's how that was the methodology behind how they were chosen. And then we're doing both quantitative and qualitative surveys with it. And so the quantitative side, we're working with a big polling firm to basically run sample sizes of about 1,000 to 2,000 surveys in these countries. And then on the qualitative side, that is the interviews. And so this is also where the Cornell Bitcoin clubs come in, because in each country, I haven't finalized the number, but it'll be around maybe 10 interviews. Each person kind of as a different category of society, academic, business, something of that nature, and really to provide the story, the context of the survey data that we gather. And so members from the Cornell Bitcoin Club are conducting these interviews. And so it's really nice because, well, for many reasons, but this is a 2-year study. And so having that is really good to kind of strengthen the membership of the Bitcoin Club, and kind of go over the transition period, since I'll graduate this year. And then it's really great because it gives students an ability to actually learn and interact rather than just listen, and really be engaged. And so that's the study that we're doing, and it'll be done. This is the first year, so in 2 years it will be published.
Wow, that's awesome. Because I mean, that was going to be my next question to ask
Yeah.
you about the research and what it's all about. And you have spoken really very well about the research and what is about. But now let me now just ask you, like, where is the research? Where is it focused, or what region is it going to be focused?
Yeah, so we have about, you could think maybe like five different region areas. But so 25 countries, we have Argentina, for instance, Hong Kong, Kenya is one of them, Lebanon, Mexico, South Korea, South Africa, I think we have Poland, Russia, Japan. So really, the United States is one. Turkey is another, Switzerland. So we try to be, really get a very broad sense across all areas of the world. But how we have grouped them, there's kind of five country managers in the club, and so some of those big ones like Europe, Asia, Africa, Middle East. And I forget what we classified the other one as, but that's the general sense.
Wow, that's really awesome. Because I also, read the articles, and I saw some of the countries that you mentioned, and I also saw that the research is about the relationship between financial freedom and the authoritarian regimes in this country. And also, these countries that you've mentioned have a kind of really stringent financial restrictions in these countries. Is there any form of maybe aftermath intervention for the research? Like, when the research is done, is there any implementation plan of the findings of the research?
Yeah, absolutely. So after it's done, we really hope all of this report, the information that's gathered here, will help inform regulatory and policy decisions, and really hope to contribute to enhancing freedom. But it is supposed to be a academic study document. Like, this is the state that we're seeing. This is how Bitcoin is furthering financial freedom or not. Rather than just kind of guessing of how policy should be made. This is no, this is the evidence. This is what we're seeing.
Wow, that's really good, because I mean, also in these countries, like I said earlier in our conversation, some of them just maybe copy the policies they see in another country, and then they try to apply it in their own context. But I mean, it makes sense if these findings is being done, and they can be shown this is what it really looks like in your own country, and this is how you can be able to make policies that really fit for the citizens. And I'm looking forward to that research, and when you are
Yeah.
done, and what the findings is going to be like. So now I would like to ask you a bit about Bitcoin adoption. And I mean, before, I also spoke about what Bitcoin means to different people. And I know that in a country like in US, and it's also important that you mentioned you didn't experience anything like maybe financial appetite or not being able to access your money. So I know
Mhm.
that most people in US really adopt Bitcoin for store of value. But when
Mhm.
you go to the global south, you go to Africa or Asia, most people adopt it because they think it's money, and it helps them to interact with other countries or with other people, or participate in the global trade. So, how do you really think that Bitcoin is really helping to bridge this global financial divides?
Yeah, well, I appreciate the context you also just kind of gave in the question, because especially when I talk to friends my age, perspective and the lens you're looking through is so important. And to tie to the linguistics element as well, what you consider Bitcoin as to be really impacts if you think it's succeeding or failing, or how it's doing. And so a lot of people, and myself as well, I have the privilege that it can be store of value. I receive my paychecks in dollars. A lot of people don't have that ability. Most businesses around me only accept dollars, although one of the projects of the Cornell Club this year, and we've already started, is working to onboard the local businesses to accept Bitcoin. And they're very excited about it, which sort of surprised me. But so that's exciting. So in the future be able to actually pay for things with Bitcoin. But perspective is hugely important, and I think that also ties into adoption and how you use it and the messaging you provide with it. So I was at Nostriga. So I was at Baltic Honey Badger in Latvia a couple weeks ago. And ahead of that, they had the Noster conference, so Noster plus Riga, Nostriga. And something that I thought was really interesting, and I was kind of noting as I was sitting there, was perhaps if Noster is a way to onboard a lot of especially younger people to Bitcoin that grow up in a more sound functioning monetary environment. And their reason is because you don't exactly know it's Bitcoin at first, you're just sending zaps. But so many people my age are always on social media, always using it. And so once we just see, Brazil recently with Twitter, once we see more countries taking that action, more people being deplatformed, feeling that pain, looking for an out solution. If it takes off with younger generations and they start, exploring, platforms like Nostr, protocols like Nostr, and then they experience Bitcoin through that way, I think that will be really interesting. I know there's a lot of talk about if utility or education scales Bitcoin. Unfortunately, just when I talk to a lot of people on campus here, you're so on the treadmill. Kind of the second you get here about, what club to join, what your summer internship is going to be, so kind of in the traditional model of how you do things that it's hard for you to give up the time at the beginning to look at what's another path of what my life could look like, kind of look outside the norm. And so I think for them, Bitcoin needs to be useful. You need to understand the values that Bitcoin embodies and why those values are important. And then I forgot I was going to say something else, but if it comes back to me, I will mention it.
Yeah. So now, how do you, in maybe 5, in 10 years, how do you envision the adoption of Bitcoin globally?
I think that's a tough question. I will say, okay, so I mentioned earlier that I really like looking at numbers, and I really like looking at kind of cycles of history. And for a project I was doing sophomore year of college, it was kind of like an international organization class. And I made just some tables of like what is the average time duration of a world reserve currency. I think just fiat currencies, the average length is about 27 years with an upper bound of about 48. And so, for context, the US dollar off the gold standard, I think we're at like year 53. But world reserve currencies, on average, I think right now we're on the eighth, is about every 100 years. If you look at kind of the big financial crises in the US, it's about like every 40 years. I say all that to say, I think the 2040s will be very interesting, probably not in the best sense way. I feel like there are hard times coming. I think that then again influences adoption. So in the next 5, 10 years, that kind of puts us close to there. I do think Bitcoin, it's rational to adopt Bitcoin. I think if you just spend a couple hours learning about it in the US, you're like, oh yeah, this makes sense because Bitcoin opens up to you all that you didn't even know to question. It highlights what assumptions you hold that maybe are not quite correct. So a roundabout, that's an undefined what do I think adoption will look like in the next 5 to 10 years, but I only think adoption is going to continue to grow.
Of course, adoption is going to continue because most times, even if maybe some people that are really reluctant, that okay, I have all that I need, I don't need Bitcoin. Maybe when it hits them, when the financial crisis comes, or maybe they have a particular experience and then they see that Bitcoin solves that problem, and then they use Bitcoin and they actually see, oh, it solves this problem, and then they'll be able to adopt Bitcoin. And it's always from there onwards, they try to learn more and then they try to get more people on board.
Yeah. And if
Okay.
you, oh, sorry, go ahead. I
No,
was just
no,
going
go
to
ahead.
add Just if you look at like the diffusion of innovation or kind of the adoption thus far of Bitcoin, we're past the tipping point. We're past that point. And so I think it's every person just sharing with their neighbor, with their friend, with their local community a little bit about Bitcoin. That's just going to continue to grow and spread. And so I think it's inevitable eventually.
Of course, adoption will continue to grow, and then more people will get onboarded on Bitcoin, and more people will have access to their money, to be able to use it, to be able to store it, and then also have all the freedom that they need around their money. Yeah, so it has been like really interesting conversation with you, because you are doing a lot in the space, a lot of work, a lot of research, and you also are really focused really on studying Bitcoin, which is really interesting, because I mean I have been educating people, meeting a lot of persons, but I haven't seen anyone who says, okay, I'm going to really study Bitcoin, I'm going to make Bitcoin my business, and I'm really looking forward to a lot more from you. It's not like I'm saying that you need to do more, but
No,
but
I always feel like most days I kind of wake up and feel like I'm failing in a sense. There's so much I want to do. There's so much more I think I could be doing. But every day I also wake up and I just feel incredibly grateful that I have found Bitcoin when I did, and that
mm,
I can apply, my effort towards building or contributing to this parallel system that we all want to build.
yeah, you are doing a lot already in the space, and I'm just basically looking forward to what more that will be coming from you. And that will bring me to my next question. I know we've spoken about all the communities that you run and also your research that you run, but what are the next projects that you are going to focus on now?
Um, so I do have a couple projects right now that I don't know where I learned this, but I kind of like to do hard things and not tell anyone about them. I will eventually, but I have a couple other projects that I'm working on, which I'm excited about.
Mm.
But then after I graduate, I will be continuing to work in Bitcoin a bit more formally. So I'm very grateful. I'm going to join the Gridless team for a couple months. I'll be in Kenya this summer, and then I will go back to the internship I had this summer at Galaxy and work on the Bitcoin mining team there. So I'm looking forward to really being kind of at the center of Bitcoin, where it all kind of begins, and really learn more about energy and the technical component. I feel very something that Bitcoin has illuminated to me is just how critical energy is for growth and human flourishing. And so to be able to work on something that really supports that mission to extend more energy access worldwide is very meaningful.
Awesome, awesome. Really looking forward to what more that is coming from you. Good job they are doing. Well done. So now you already mentioned that you'll be in Kenya, so I don't need to ask you if you are going to come for the African Bitcoin conference, but I want to ask you, how was your experience last year in the African Bitcoin conference, and what are you looking forward to for the conference this year?
Yeah, it was a hugely special experience last year. I had been to Tanzania a couple of times, but I had never been to Ghana, kind of the other part of the continent. So that was very grateful to be able to go. And then I loved being able, how many students you all had there. I think you held the conference very close to the University of Ghana. And so there were a lot of students that came, which maybe I wasn't expecting because pretty much most other conferences I've been to, there's not a lot of young students there. So that was really special, and I have been able to keep in touch with them throughout the year this year. So I hope to see some that maybe come again, and then also be able to meet others that I've been able to get to know from Kenya, and see them in person, and just be in community with everyone there.
Awesome. Looking forward to meeting you in Kenya from the 9th to the 11th of December
Yeah.
2024. Thank you so much, Ella, for making out time to share all your awesome work, a lot of work that you are doing Thank you so much. And
No, thank you, Nick, and thank you for everything that you do and for having the conference. And it's so meaningful and hugely grateful to be able to be with you today and to come in a couple weeks.